Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Big Momma's House 2, released in 2006, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. There's a certain type of undercover cop film that brings more than just suspense or action. It delivers full-bodied comedy wrapped in absurd disguises and awkward situations. Big Momma's House 2 doesn't just continue the antics of FBI agent Malcolm Turner. It turns up the heat, raises the stakes, and throws him right back into the padded shoes and flowery dresses of Big Momma, everyone's favorite over-the-top Southern matriarch. It's not a movie that takes itself too seriously, and that's exactly the point. Packed with hilarious disguises, chaotic mishaps, and just enough heartfelt moments to ground the madness, this sequel builds on the charm of the first while diving into a brand-new mission that somehow becomes both outrageous and unexpectedly sweet. At its heart, the film is once again about Malcolm Turner, played with sharp comedic timing by Martin Lawrence. He's still the same enthusiastic, slightly impulsive FBI agent with a knack for disguises, and, as the opening scenes show us, not quite ready to give up fieldwork. Though he's settled into married life with Sherry, Nia Long, and become a stepfather to her son, Trent, the itch to get back in the game is still there. And it doesn't take long before he throws himself, quite literally, back into another top-secret assignment. But this time, instead of infiltrating a criminal's lair or tracking down a dangerous fugitive, Malcolm finds himself deep in the heart of suburban family life. When a fellow agent working on a high-level tech case turns up dead under mysterious circumstances, the FBI suspects there's a leak within the household of Tom Fuller, a software engineer whose security program is believed to be compromised. The problem? Tom lives in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by PTA meetings, carpool lanes, and soccer practice. There's no obvious way to infiltrate the house, unless, of course, someone takes on the role of their new nanny. And so, Big Momma returns. With a suitcase full of wigs, body padding, and southern sass, Malcolm transforms once again into Hattie Mae Pierce, or Big Momma. This time, he's not just faking it for a few days, he's committing to the full suburban nanny experience. Cooking, cleaning, tutoring 3 rambunctious kids, and managing the chaos of a family teetering on the edge. It's a far cry from the high-octane operations Malcolm is used to, but it's also a perfect hiding place for surveillance. And naturally, a goldmine of comedic scenarios. From the moment Big Momma waddles through the Fuller family's front door, everything begins to spiral. The Fuller children, Andrew, Carrie, and Molly, are a mix of precocious rebellious and just plain confused by the towering woman suddenly in charge of their routine. Tom, Mark Moses, the father and target of the investigation, is too distracted by his secretive work to notice the strange energy in the house, while his wife Leah, Emily Proctor, is the picture of polished suburban motherhood, desperate to hold her family together while clearly cracking under pressure. It's in this tension that the film finds its sweet spot. Malcolm may be a man on a mission, but as Big Momma, he's thrust into a household that's unraveling in more ways than one. Each child presents a challenge. Molly's intense perfectionism, Andrew's nerdy anxiety, and Carrie's rebellious streak, and Malcolm, in his full-on Big Momma persona, begins to connect with them in ways he never expected. Sure, he's still secretly bugging laptops and snooping through home offices after bedtime, but somewhere between ballet rehearsals and helping with homework, he starts becoming something more, a real part of their lives. Of course, the comedy never lets up. Whether it's Big Momma getting stuck in a doggy door, trying to teach a yoga class, or fending off suspicious neighbors, the film leans hard into the physical humor and outrageous setups that made the first movie such a hit. Martin Lawrence throws himself into every scene with fearless energy, fully embracing the absurdity of his double life. But this time, there's an added layer of warmth. Beneath the padded suit and exaggerated Southern accent, Malcolm is a man rediscovering empathy. Not just as an agent, but as a stepfather learning how to show up for others in a way he never has before. As the plot thickens, so does the tension. Malcolm begins to suspect that Tom Fuller isn't just clueless about his company's security breach. He may be involved in something much more dangerous. The closer Malcolm gets to uncovering the truth, the harder it becomes to separate the mission from the family. He starts to see the Fullers not as suspects, but as people, flawed, stressed out, and trying to stay afloat. But just as Malcolm begins to truly connect with the children and see past their quirks, the stakes are raised. A rival operative from within the FBI complicates the investigation, and Malcolm realizes he may have underestimated how deep the conspiracy runs. The twist? Someone inside the Fuller home is feeding information to an outside source, and it's not who Malcolm, or the audience, expects. It's not Tom. It's not Leah. It's someone smaller, quieter, and much closer to Malcolm's Big Mama persona than anyone could have guessed. This revelation forces Malcolm into a corner. He can blow his cover and stop the leak, or keep pretending for just a little longer to protect the children he's grown attached to. What follows is a chaotic climax full of mistaken identities, unmasked secrets, and a surprisingly emotional payoff. Malcolm is forced to reveal who he really is, not just to the family he's infiltrated, but to himself. The lines between his job and his heart blur completely, leading to a moment of vulnerability that is both funny and genuinely touching. It's in these moments, scattered between the gags and disguises, where the film finds its most lasting emotional beats. Big Mama's House 2 is, at its core, a comedy. But what makes it stand out is how it uses the mask of Big Mama not just as a disguise, but as a lens. Through her, Malcolm sees the world differently. He sees children who need guidance, a marriage quietly falling apart, and a wife waiting for her husband to finally show up, not just physically, but emotionally. And through the absurdity, he finds clarity. There's something clever about how the film uses the tools of slapstick and disguise to explore themes of family, connection, and the ways people often hide, not behind wigs or makeup, but behind work, ego, fear. As Big Mama, Malcolm is able to say things he couldn't as himself. He listens more. He's present. And in that way, the film suggests that sometimes we become our best selves when we step outside the roles we've written for ourselves. As the movie races toward its final act, all the layers come to a head. Malcolm uncovers the truth behind the tech breach, confronts the internal mole within the bureau, and just barely manages to rescue the Fullers from a high-stakes takedown. It's classic undercover movie fun, complete with gadgets, chases, and a final unmasking. But what sticks isn't just the action. It's the final image of a man, now free of the wig and dress, hugging the children who once thought he was someone else, and realizing that maybe, just maybe, pretending to be Big Mama helped him become something. And just before the credits roll, we get that perfect comedic button. A new nanny arrives at the Fuller home. Slimmer, younger, clearly inexperienced. The kids roll their eyes. And somewhere, off in the distance, we hear Big Mama's voice one last time. I told y'all, nobody bakes a sweet potato pie like Big Mama. In the end, Big Mama's House 2 delivers exactly what it promises, a laugh-out-loud ride full of mishaps, mistaken identities, and the kind of disguises you can't unsee. But it also manages to sneak in something more, a story about presence, parenting, and the often overlooked power of paying attention. It's a film that doesn't need to change the world to leave a mark. It just needs to make you laugh, and maybe make you feel something too. And for a comedy built around an undercover grandma, that's more than enough. The sun is shining over Atlanta, casting a warm suburban glow on an unsuspecting city, its streets filled with neatly mowed lawns, white picket fences, and sleepy cul-de-sacs. But beneath this peaceful surface, something is brewing. Not quite sinister, but definitely suspicious. It's here that Malcolm Turner, once again played with hilarious finesse by Martin Lawrence, finds himself restless. He's traded high-stakes fieldwork for a slower-paced life with his wife, Sherry, and stepson, Trent. But this new role as family man doesn't quite sit right. There's a kind of itch Malcolm can't ignore, an itch that can only be scratched by the thrill of a mission. When the film opens, Malcolm is already up to something. Not officially. Not yet. He's lurking outside a government facility, eavesdropping, following leads, and generally sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. Dressed as Big Mama for an unrelated snoop and scan scenario, He ends up bungling an operation and getting officially benched by the FBI. His boss pulls him aside with that classic look of irritation reserved for agents who just don't follow the playbook. "You're not in the field anymore," he says. "You're not that guy." But Malcolm doesn't hear those words. Not really. Because there's a whisper of something dangerous brewing, a murdered agent, a stolen digital security program, and a company with secrets buried beneath PowerPoint presentations and firewall protocols. The FBI is investigating a tech developer named Tom Fuller, a seemingly average man with 3 kids, a beautiful wife, and a suspicious connection to a string of encrypted files linked to national security breaches. With Malcolm officially off the case, he does what he does best, finds his own way in. And how? By reviving the only identity that's ever truly let him get close to his targets, Big Momma. The transformation is once again a full-body commitment. Wig, fat suit, orthopedic shoes, floral dresses, and that southern drawl that somehow disarms and unsettles in equal measure. But this time, Big Momma's mission is not at a crime scene or drug ring. It's smack in the middle of the Fuller family's household, posing as their new live-in nanny. Leah Fuller, Tom's wife, is frazzled but graceful. She's got PTA meetings to run, a charity auction to organize, and 3 wildly different kids to raise while her husband buries himself in work. So when Big Momma arrives, resume forged, references faked, attitude bigger than her purse, Leah is desperate enough to accept the help without digging too deep. What follows is a beautiful chaos. The Fuller children are not easily won over. There's Molly, the eldest daughter, whose obsession with dance and achievement masks a brewing identity crisis. Carrie, the rebellious middle child, alternates between sarcastic eye rolls and dramatic outbursts. And little Andrew, a genius in training, is glued to his computer and terrified of everything not made of wires and circuits. Malcolm, deep in character, tries to navigate the wild terrain of babysitting, tutoring, cooking, and laundry, while still investigating Tom Fuller behind the scenes. Every time he tucks the kids into bed, he sneaks off to poke through office drawers and search for encrypted files. The comedy is relentless. There's a yoga class scene where Big Momma leads a group of athletic moms in a series of stretches that go hilariously wrong. There's a moment involving a vacuum cleaner, a ferret, and a laptop that leads to one of the most ridiculous chase scenes ever set in a kitchen. And yet, within all the slapstick and chaos, something begins to shift. Malcolm starts to actually connect with the kids, not as a cop in disguise, but as a caregiver. They begin to lean on him, ask for advice, and depend on his presence. And with each passing day, Malcolm's sense of duty expands from national security to personal accountability. Meanwhile, his personal life is beginning to feel the strain. Sherry, his wife, starts sensing that Malcolm is drifting again, emotionally distant, frequently distracted. She doesn't yet know about the mission. And Trent, his stepson, notices too. There's a quiet sadness to these domestic scenes, ones that contrast sharply with the wild antics of Big Momma's day-to-day. Malcolm wants to be a good father, a good husband, but he's caught between duty and disguise, between the man he is and the man he keeps pretending to be inside the Fuller house. The mystery deepens. Tom is increasingly jittery. Leah mentions that her husband sometimes disappears into his office for hours, refusing to say what he's working on. One night, Malcolm overhears a tense phone call, Tom speaking in hushed tones about a deliverable and deadlines that can't slip. Suspicion grows. Could Tom be the leak? Or is he just a pawn in something larger? The turning point comes when Big Momma, in an effort to boost Carrie's confidence, volunteers to direct her school talent show. It's one of the most delightfully absurd scenes in the film, with Big Momma juggling stage parents, musical numbers, and costume disasters, all while trying to scan a USB drive she swiped from Tom's briefcase. It's multitasking at a whole new level, and it's brilliant. But it's also the moment where the stakes suddenly rise. The files on that drive contain more than corporate spreadsheets. There's code, lines of it, connected to a program designed to access government servers. And it's not old. It's active. Malcolm realizes that whoever is behind this leak is planning to use the software soon, maybe even within days. His mission is no longer just surveillance. He has to act fast. But he can't blow his cover. Not yet. Not when the family still trusts him. Not when he hasn't figured out who the real threat is. The danger isn't just outside the house anymore. It's inside. And Big Momma, with her oven mitts and oversized glasses, is the only one standing between a vulnerable family and something much bigger than they can see. There's also a shadowy presence, someone watching Malcolm. A figure from within the bureau who seems to know more than they should. They appear in the background, always a step behind, always watching. Malcolm feels the walls closing in, both from within the house and from the agency he once trusted. Is someone trying to sabotage the mission? Is the mole inside the family, or inside the FBI? With the tension climbing and his dual life pulling at the seams, Malcolm finds himself at a crossroads. Does he rip off the disguise and expose everything? Or stay hidden just a little longer, hoping he can piece the puzzle together before it's too late? The answer, for now, lies somewhere in between. The investigation heats up. The children begin to confide in him, unaware that behind the makeup is a man risking everything. And Tom, increasingly nervous, begins locking his office at night. Big Momma is running out of time. But Malcolm Turner? He's just getting started. The calm over the Fuller household is deceptive. With every passing day, the walls around the secret Malcolm is trying to uncover begin to tremble. While the family goes through their daily routines, school drop-offs, dance practices, dinners full of awkward silences, Malcolm, still disguised in the towering form of Big Momma, is moving with greater urgency. The files he found on Tom's USB drive aren't just suspicious, they're damning. Lines of code, backdoor access points, and server trails that point directly to federal databases. It's clear now. Someone is using Tom's software for something deeply illegal, maybe even treasonous. But the who and why still remain unanswered. And worse, there's no telling how much time is left before that code is deployed. As Malcolm digs deeper, he realizes the Fullers are far from the villains he once suspected. Tom, though evasive, doesn't move like a criminal. He's more like a man drowning under pressure. There's fear in his eyes, but it's the kind of fear that suggests he's being watched, or worse, used. Leah, his wife, continues to open up to Big Momma in brief moments between PTA meetings and late-night laundry. She confides that Tom has been acting distant, that she's worried he's hiding something, and that she sometimes wonders if he regrets the life they've built. But it's Molly, the eldest daughter, who unknowingly cracks open the next piece of the mystery. During a seemingly innocent conversation over breakfast, Molly mentions that her father's company recently started sending him off-site more frequently. He always says it's just for updates, she says, but he's never gone more than an hour, and he never takes his phone. It's a small detail, but for Malcolm, it's a massive red flag. The tech world runs on connectivity. A man working on critical software never leaving with his device? That's a signal. Whatever Tom is hiding, it's not just at home, it's off-site, somewhere quiet. Somewhere private. So Malcolm does what any good undercover agent would do. He follows. With the help of some carefully planted tracking software and a brilliantly executed excuse involving a last-minute shopping trip for a bake sale, Big Momma disappears for a few hours and tails Tom across the city. The trail leads to an innocuous warehouse on the outskirts of town. Inside, Malcolm finds a makeshift lab, filled with servers, whiteboards covered in diagrams, and a single desk littered with notes written in Tom's unmistakable handwriting. But what's more alarming is who else is there. Standing at the back of the room, talking quietly with a man Malcolm recognizes from FBI briefings, is Gail, an agent Malcolm once worked with, someone he thought had been reassigned overseas. Now she's here, in civilian clothes, whispering with a man suspected of selling digital access codes on the black market. It hits Malcolm hard. The mole isn't in the Fuller home. It's in the bureau. Gail's presence changes everything. It means Tom's being used. His software is a gateway, but he's just the locksmith. Gail and her associate, working with an international tech crime ring, are using his algorithms to punch holes in federal databases, stealing classified files and selling them off to the highest bidder. But Tom has no idea. He's been manipulated under the guise of government contract work, convinced he's building firewalls when, in truth, he's building a tunnel. And the moment he finds out, he becomes a liability. Back at the Fuller house, Malcolm has to keep up appearances. It's harder now. He's distracted, exhausted, and starting to slip. His dual life is pulling at the seams. The children notice the difference. Big Momma doesn't smile as easily. Her jokes don't land. And when Leah walks in on her crying in the laundry room, the moment is painfully intimate. Malcolm, under layers of costume, can't say the truth, but Leah sees something real. Something vulnerable. "Whatever you're going through," she says softly, "you don't have to go through it alone." But he does. For now. Malcolm makes a call to his contact in the bureau, a man named Kevin who still trusts him. They arrange a meet-up under the radar to share the new intel. But Gail is already one step ahead. She knows Malcolm's back in the game. She's seen the surveillance pings. And she's ready to make her move. While the Fuller family prepares for the school talent show, a moment Big Momma promised she'd never miss, Malcolm is forced to step away again. He meets Kevin at a parking garage, slips him a flash drive with the files, and lays out everything. But before they can part ways, the lights flicker. Tires screech. 2 armed men in a black van cut off the exit. It's an ambush. Gail isn't just cleaning up the operation. She's eliminating anyone who knows what follows is a chaotic, fast-paced chase through the city. Malcolm, shedding his Big Momma disguise mid-run, barely escapes with his life. Kevin is captured. The flash drive is lost. And Malcolm realizes, if they're willing to kill a fellow agent, they won't hesitate to take out Tom. Or anyone else who stands in the way. And now, the stakes are higher than ever. Malcolm races back to the Fuller home, where the talent show is already underway. Carrie is on stage, dancing her heart out, while Molly nervously waits her turn. Leah watches from the audience, beaming, unaware of the danger looming just outside. Tom, meanwhile, has received a call from Gail. She's told him the FBI is onto him, that he needs to run. He's confused, panicked. He starts packing. But he doesn't know that Gail's not trying to protect him. She's luring him out to finish the job. Malcolm bursts into the venue, half-dressed, still catching his breath, and immediately scans for the family. He finds Leah and the kids, but Tom's missing. A frantic call later and Malcolm's racing toward the warehouse, hoping he's not too late. What happens next unfolds like a spy thriller climax fused with slapstick genius. Malcolm, now fully out of disguise, infiltrates the warehouse just as Gail and her team corner Tom. She's got a gun. Tom's finally realized the truth. And Malcolm, armed with nothing but his wits and a folding chair, throws himself into the fray. What follows is a chaotic scuffle, culminating in one of the most satisfying takedowns in comedy action memory. Big Momma's purse, tossed just right, knocks Gail cold. Backup arrives seconds later. The data is recovered. Tom is cleared. Gail and her crew are arrested. And Malcolm? He doesn't get a medal. He doesn't want one. Back at the Fuller home, the kids are still reeling from the sudden absence of their beloved nanny. But when Malcolm shows up, this time as himself, there's a moment of revelation. They recognize him. Beneath the voice, the wig, the flour-stained apron, he was the one who showed up. Who helped them. Who listened. Leah, too, realizes who he was, and thanks him, not just for protecting her family, but for becoming part of it, even if only for a little while. Back at his own home, Malcolm finally sits down with his wife and stepson. He apologizes, not for the mission, but for drifting. 4. Hiding behind his work instead of facing the discomfort of real connection. 4. Hiding behind his work instead of facing the discomfort of real connection. Sherry, with the strength that made her fall in love with him in the first place, forgives, but doesn't let him off easy. Being a hero out there doesn't mean much, she says, if you're not one in here. In the final scenes, we see a quieter Malcolm. Present. At peace. Helping Trent with homework. Cooking dinner, badly. Letting go of the disguise, not the Big Mama suit, but the one he wore around his heart. And then, just before the credits roll, a knock at the door. Leah Fuller. Standing with her 3 kids. Holding a tray of sweet potato pie. Thought we owed you one last thank you. Malcolm smiles. Big Mama might be gone, but what she left behind. That's very real. Because in the end, Big Mama's House 2 isn't just about cracking a case. It's about peeling back the layers, of comedy, of disguise, of emotional distance, and finding the truth underneath. That sometimes, the best undercover work we do, is in our own lives. Underneath the layers of padding, the wigs, and the endless comedy of mistaken identity, Big Mama's House 2 is powered by a lineup of characters that go far beyond their surface personas. While the movie is often remembered for its outrageous disguises and high-energy humor, it's the characters, their quirks, their arcs, and the unexpected ways they connect, that ultimately give the film its charm and heart. Each one, from the overworked father to the misunderstood kids and the man behind Big Mama herself, contributes something vital to the story's emotional rhythm. Let's take off the costume, step behind the laughs, and look at who these people really are. At the center of it all is Malcolm Turner, the man who becomes Big Mama. Malcolm isn't your typical movie agent. He's not cold or mechanical. He doesn't shoot first and ask questions later. He's emotional, impulsive, and maybe a little too eager to prove himself. What makes Malcolm such a compelling character in this sequel is how much he's evolved since the first film. He's now a husband and stepfather, and while that new life promises stability and love, it's clear that Malcolm hasn't fully stepped into it. There's a restlessness in him, an unease with domesticity that he doesn't quite know how to name. Malcolm is torn between 2 versions of himself, the responsible family man and the thrill-seeking undercover agent. He loves his wife, and he wants to be there for his stepson, but the moment danger knocks, he's out the door and back in a wig before anyone can stop him. His choice to take on the Big Mama role again isn't just about patriotism or catching the bad guy. It's about chasing that part of himself that still feels useful, that still feels alive. And yet, the irony is clear. In pretending to be someone else, he ends up learning more about who he actually is. As Big Mama, Malcolm doesn't just put on a disguise. He immerses himself in another identity completely. And what's fascinating is how that identity, built for deception, becomes a vessel for truth. Through Big Mama, Malcolm connects in ways he's never been able to as himself. He comforts, he listens, he softens. The wig and the dress become more than props, they're emotional armor. And when he finally takes them off, he's left with raw, unfiltered vulnerability. Opposite Malcolm stands Tom Fuller, the man at the center of the investigation. Tom is a character built on contrast. He's successful but strained, present but emotionally absent, involved but clearly hiding something. What's intriguing about Tom is how ordinary he is on the surface. He's not some mastermind villain or tech genius plotting world domination. He's a father, a husband, a man trying to meet expectations and keep his family afloat while under enormous, unseen pressure. What makes Tom interesting isn't just the suspicion that surrounds him. It's the slow unraveling of his emotional walls. Through the lens of Big Mama, we see a man who's losing his grip not because of guilt, but because he's stuck in a situation he doesn't fully understand. He thinks he's doing the right thing, even when the signs say otherwise. And as the truth comes out, that he's being used, manipulated, set up, it's not a moment of vindication. It's a moment of pain. Because what Tom wanted more than anything wasn't money or success, it was control. Control over his work, his home, his life. And all of that was slipping through his fingers. Then there's Leah Fuller, Tom's wife. At first glance, she's the classic suburban mom, organized, involved, and perpetually stressed. But as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that Leah is quietly carrying the emotional weight of her entire household. She's the glue, the backbone, the one holding everything together while no one seems to notice she's unraveling too. Leah's relationship with Big Momma is particularly rich. It starts as a functional one. She needs help, and Big Momma shows up at the right time. But it quickly becomes something more. Leah begins to open up in those stolen kitchen moments, those wine-soaked nights when the house is quiet. She reveals her doubts, her fears, her loneliness. And while she never knows Big Momma's true identity, the connection they share is deeply real. Big Momma becomes her confidant, her support, her mirror. Through that bond, we see Leah not just as a side character, but as a woman fighting to be heard in a house full of noise. The Fuller children, too, are far more than comic relief. Each one brings a unique emotional thread to the story, and each one undergoes a subtle transformation as the narrative unfolds. Molly, the eldest, is high-achieving and tightly wound. She lives in a world of pressure, school, dance, image, and it's clear she's terrified of failing. But beneath that perfectionism is a girl who desperately wants to be seen. Big Momma becomes the first adult who doesn't just cheer for her successes but asks her what she wants, what she's afraid of. Their bond is gentle and genuine, and when Molly finally breaks down and admits she's tired of pretending, it's one of the film's quietest but most affecting moments. Carrie, the middle child, is the rebel. She's moody, sarcastic, always pushing boundaries. At first, she seems like a typical angst-filled teen, but there's depth in her defiance. Carrie is hurting. She's watching her parents drift apart, feeling invisible in the process. Her tough exterior is armor, and Big Momma, in all her dramatic flamboyance, somehow sees right through it. There's a beautiful reversal here, the teen who trusts no one slowly letting her guard down, not because someone forced her to, but because someone finally noticed her. And Andrew, the youngest, is the quirky genius, brilliant with computers, anxious in life. His storyline is quiet, tucked between louder plot points, but it's touching. Andrew doesn't fit in. He's awkward, overly literal, prone to panic. But Big Momma never tries to change him. Instead, she celebrates his weirdness, his intelligence, his sensitivity. When Andrew finally finds the courage to face the outside world without shutting down, it's a subtle victory. Not flashy, but real. Together, the Fuller kids represent different shades of childhood under pressure. They're each struggling in their own way, and Big Momma becomes a strange, hilarious lifeline in their messy little worlds. What's compelling is how Malcolm, as Big Momma, finds his own reflection in them. Their fears echo his own. Their confusion, their longing, their misplaced anger, it all circles back to him. Their fears echo his own. Their confusion, their longing, their misplaced anger, it all circles back to him. Even the secondary characters play their part with surprising nuance. Gail, the double-crossing agent, may seem like a plot device, but she's more than just a villain. She represents the betrayal Malcolm fears most, not just from the Bureau, but from himself. Her presence forces him to confront the cracks in the institution he once believed in. And when she turns, it's not just a plot twist. It's a personal reckoning. Sherry, Malcolm's wife, isn't given a lot of screen time, but what she brings is weighty. She's patient, but not passive. Her frustration with Malcolm's double life isn't loud, it's weary. And when she finally calls him out, it's not in anger, but in exhaustion. "You want to save everyone else," she says. "But who's saving us?" That line cuts deeper than any comedic punch. It reminds us that real relationships require presence, not just physical, but emotional. And for all Malcolm's heroics, it's this relationship that remains the hardest to navigate. There's something quietly profound in how the characters orbit around Big Momma. None of them know who she really is. Yet through her, they reveal their most honest selves. It's a strange kind of emotional irony. The disguise becomes the truth-teller. And the more time Malcolm spends as Big Momma, the more he's forced to drop his own internal mask. By the time the film reaches its resolution, the transformations feel earned. Malcolm is no longer running from stillness. Tom is no longer blind to the manipulation around him. Leah is no longer silent in her marriage. The kids are no longer islands. Each of them has grown, not dramatically, not in blockbuster fashion, but in those small, human ways that actually last. And perhaps that's the quiet genius of Big Momma's house, too. It lures you in with laughs and costumes, but it leaves you thinking about connection, about identity, about how easy it is to hide behind the roles we play, parent, spouse, professional, and how much courage it takes to let those roles go, even for a moment, and be truly seen. So when we remember these characters, we don't just remember the jokes or the disguises. We remember the moments in between, the soft conversations, the awkward truths, the silly dances and honest stumbles. We remember them not because they were perfect, but because they were trying, each in their own flawed, hilarious, beautiful way. And sometimes, that's all any of us can do. Sometimes, the funniest stories don't happen in front of the camera. They unfold behind it, when the director yells, "Cut!" The costumes come off, and the actors and crew find themselves tangled in the chaos of real life. And when it comes to a movie like Big Momma's House 2, where the entire premise hinges on disguises, slapstick comedy, and absurd undercover antics, it should come as no surprise that the production of the film came with its fair share of strange, hilarious, and downright unbelievable moments. In fact, once you dig a little deeper into the behind-the-scenes world of this over-the-top comedy, you start to realize that making the movie might have been just as wild as watching it. To begin with, the transformation of Martin Lawrence into Big Momma was not a quick, behind-the-curtain process. It was an event. Every single day, it took upwards of 4 hours to bring Big Momma to life, from the intricate application of the full-body fat suit to the carefully constructed wig and prosthetics that transformed Lawrence's face. The suit itself weighed over 70 pounds and had to be fitted to Lawrence's frame perfectly to avoid overheating or movement issues during stunts. In fact, the production team had to build a special cooling system into the suit, complete with internal fans and cold gel packs, to keep Lawrence from passing out during long shoots under studio lights. And even with all that, there were moments when the actor had to call for breaks just to breathe. It became such a ritual that the crew nicknamed the trailer where Lawrence got into costume the Momma Zone. Inside, the energy would shift the moment the wig went on. Lawrence would start talking in Big Momma's voice before he even left the makeup chair, fully stepping into character hours before cameras rolled. The cast and crew quickly learned that once Big Momma arrived on set, they were no longer dealing with Martin. "It's like the spirit of an old Southern woman just took over the building," one assistant director joked in an interview. Even the extras would start calling him ma'am without thinking. But with such an intense physical costume came some very real, very weird challenges. For one, visibility was limited. The prosthetic facepiece didn't allow much peripheral vision, and the oversized dress often caused Lawrence to misjudge distance. During one scene in the kitchen, where Big Momma is supposed to catch a falling pie with perfect comedic timing, Lawrence missed his mark entirely and accidentally sent the entire dessert flying into a lighting rig, coating an expensive camera in whipped cream and peach filling. Instead of cutting, the director let the scene roll, and the spontaneous mess made the crew laugh so hard it delayed production by 20 minutes. That exact pie stunt had to be res-hot 5 times before it landed just right, and by then, Lawrence reportedly swore off peach pie for the rest of the shoot. And it wasn't just the costume causing chaos. The child actors in the Fuller family brought their own wild energy to set. Chloe Grace Moretz, who played Molly Fuller, was just 8 years old at the time and already had a knack for stealing scenes, not just on camera, but off. Between takes, she would challenge Martin Lawrence to dance-offs, often trying to get him to break character by performing pop songs at full volume. One crew member remembered a day where Moritz convinced most of the cast to join her in a full-length performance of Since You've Been Gone by Kelly Clarkson, while Lawrence, still in full Big Mama gear, sat in the middle clapping along like a proud auntie. What many fans don't know is that Lawrence wasn't the only actor who had to undergo a major transformation for the film. A number of the stunt doubles and stand-ins also had to dress as Big Mama during action sequences. One scene, where Big Mama attempts to scale a fence while chasing a suspect, was so physically demanding that it required not one, not two, but 3 separate stunt performers in rotating shifts. The suit was simply too heavy for one person to manage the full sequence alone. And to make matters stranger, one of the doubles was a male gymnast in his 20s, chosen not for his acting ability but because he could perform a full backflip in the Big Mama suit. His footage didn't make the final cut, but the crew kept his flip on the blooper reel, and it quickly became an internal favorite. Speaking of bloopers, there's a particularly infamous scene involving a robotic vacuum cleaner, a dog, and a wig. The scene was supposed to be simple. Big Mama walks into the room, steps on a toy, loses balance, and falls in a heap. But on the day of the shoot, the robotic vacuum began acting unpredictably. Instead of stopping when it hit an obstacle, as it was designed to, it kept moving forward, dragging Big Mama's wig along the floor until it wrapped itself around the wheel. The crew watched in horror and amusement as the robotic device spun in circles with a tangle of synthetic hair caught in its gears. It took 15 minutes to untangle the wig, during which Lawrence refused to take off the rest of the costume, instead sipping iced tea in character and blaming the devil in the Roomba. There were also location-based challenges. The house used for the Fuller family's suburban home was a real property located just outside Los Angeles. It was perfect from the outside: manicured lawn, double garage, white shutters. But what the location scouts didn't know was that the neighborhood had a raccoon problem. Specifically, one very aggressive raccoon who had claimed the house's attic as its own. Multiple times during filming, the raccoon would scratch and thump above the ceiling, causing scenes to be paused mid-dialogue. Once, it even dropped down into the bathroom set, startling the costume team mid-makeup. Eventually, animal control had to be called, and the raccoon was affectionately nicknamed Big Mama's 4th child by the cast. And then there was the scene with the ferret. In one particularly ridiculous moment in the film, Big Mama wrestles a pet ferret that has escaped from its cage. What viewers may not realize is that the ferret used was notoriously temperamental. Trained for months, the animal was supposed to run a simple path across the floor and leap into a basket. Instead, on the first day of shooting that scene, it climbed straight up Lawrence's leg inside the Big Mama suit and refused to come down. Cameras weren't rolling, but the screams were real. The ferret was gently retrieved, and the scene was eventually filmed using a combination of 2 backup ferrets and 1 animatronic version for close-ups. Even the soundtrack had its surprises. One of the dance numbers in the school talent show scene wasn't originally in the script. Lawrence, improvising during a break, started lip-syncing to Ain't Nobody by Chaka Khan while waiting for lighting to reset. The kids joined in, the director loved it, and within hours, the music team scrambled to get clearance for the song. The scene made it into the final cut with minor adjustments, becoming one of the most memorable moments in the entire movie. But not all surprises were funny. Midway through filming, a small fire broke out in the makeup trailer when one of the prosthetic heating ovens malfunctioned. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the incident delayed production by several days and forced the team to find a new location for the costume department. It also resulted in the loss of one of Big Mama's custom wigs, which led the wardrobe team to quickly restyle a backup version. If you look closely, there's a scene where Big Mama's hair suddenly changes style halfway through. That wasn't planned, it was simply a case of wig improvisation. Behind the camera, the energy was just as wild. Director John Whitesell reportedly encouraged improvisation on set, often telling actors to just go with it and see what happened. That led to some of the film's best lines, including several of Big Mama's sassiest comebacks, which Lawrence made up on the spot. The production kept multiple cameras rolling during every scene, just to make sure they captured the unscripted gold. And by the end of the shoot, there were over 60 hours of bloopers and alternate takes, many of which have never seen the light of day. There was even talk of a Big Momma's House blooper compilation DVD, but due to licensing and actor approval issues, it never got released. Still, members of the crew say that those deleted scenes contain some of the funniest, weirdest, most unpredictable moments in comedy film history, including a version of the yoga scene that ends with Big Momma accidentally launching herself into a pool while mid-split. And perhaps the strangest fact of all, Martin Lawrence didn't just influence the script, he rewrote entire sections of it. Working closely with the writing team, he adjusted scenes based on audience reactions to the first film. One of his biggest contributions? Giving Big Momma more heart. Lawrence wanted the sequel to go beyond slapstick. He pushed for scenes that showed Big Momma helping the children, counseling the family, and revealing more of Malcolm's emotional core. "It can still be funny," he said in an interview, "but I want her to matter. I want her to feel real." And somehow, through all the raccoons, robotic vacuums, and wig disasters, she did. Because when the camera finally stopped rolling, and the sets were struck, and the costumes packed away, what remained wasn't just a wacky comedy or a box office sequel. It was a collection of strange, beautiful, unforgettable moments, captured not just in film, but in the laughter that erupted off-camera, the bonds formed between cast and crew, and the absurd joy of creating something as big, bold, and bizarre as Big Momma's House 2. And sometimes, that's the best kind of story there is. In the landscape of early 2000s comedies, Big Momma's House 2 stands as a strange, oddly comforting pillar of its time, an unapologetically silly movie that, upon first glance, seems content just to make its audience laugh. But when examined with a more critical eye, the film reveals an unexpected depth woven within its slapstick exterior. It may be easy to dismiss it as just another costume sequel banking on the success of the original, but inside the chaos of wigs, fat suits, and undercover antics, there are clear intentions. To explore themes of identity, responsibility, the nature of connection, and the sometimes humorous, sometimes painful truths about what it means to show up for other people, the film kicks off with a comedic, if not outright ridiculous, recon mission gone wrong, a moment that does double duty. On one hand, it reintroduces the audience to Malcolm Turner's instinctive need to get involved in something bigger than himself. On the other, it sets the tone for the kind of comedy the film trades in: physical, exaggerated, and willing to go as far as needed for a laugh. But beneath the banana peel gags and pratfalls, that first event tells us everything we need to know about Malcolm's internal conflict. He's not at peace with ordinary life. He can't sit still. There's a longing to matter, to be relevant, to feel capable in the ways that used to define him. That yearning becomes the emotional engine behind the entire film. When Malcolm takes on the Big Momma persona again, it's not just about solving a case, it's about returning to a version of himself that felt powerful and needed. That shift is critical to the film's undercurrent. Disguised as a woman and surrounded by suburban mundanity, Malcolm finds himself faced with a challenge he doesn't know how to navigate: emotional labor. It's no longer just about catching the bad guy. It's about helping a fractured family find its rhythm again. And that task, as absurd as it is coming from someone in a floral muumuu, feels unexpectedly authentic. One of the film's more subtle but important events comes when Big Momma begins forming real connections with the Fuller children. These interactions are more than narrative filler. They ground the film in something human. Molly's pressure to be perfect, Carrie's rebellion, and Andrew's quiet anxiety aren't exaggerated for comedy. They're portrayed with just enough sincerity to make the viewer lean in. And that's where the film gains emotional resonance. These are not just props for Big Momma's antics. They're symbols of the emotional disconnection that exists in so many homes. Through comedic absurdity, the film shines a light on real-life dynamics: working parents too busy to see their kids, marriages buckling under pressure, and children acting out in desperate attempts to be noticed. Critically, these scenes serve as the counterbalance to the more extreme comic set pieces. Without them, Big Momma's House 2 would likely fall flat, relying entirely on gags. But with them, the film achieves a delicate emotional duality. It knows it's a comedy, but it doesn't ignore the emotional cost of the roles its characters are trapped in. The entire premise of Malcolm pretending to be Big Mama becomes a metaphor, an exaggerated expression of the facades people wear every day. Malcolm is literally in costume, but the Fullers are figuratively wearing theirs too. Tom hides behind work. Leah hides behind perfection. The kids hide behind attitude, silence, and obedience. Everyone is playing a role, and ironically, it's the one in full costume who helps them rediscover who they really are. The turning point, when Malcolm discovers that the real threat isn't Tom, but someone using Tom's software as a backdoor into national security, shifts the narrative into more familiar action comedy territory. But from a critical standpoint, this development does something clever. It reframes the danger. The enemy isn't a person, it's an institution, a broken system that manipulates good people into doing bad things. This adds a layer of thematic complexity. The real villain, Gail, represents institutional betrayal, a colleague-turned-opponent who embodies the worst-case scenario of Malcolm's own choices. She's what happens when you stay undercover for the wrong reasons too long. She's competent, charismatic, and completely detached from moral accountability. Through her, the film critiques the very systems that created Malcolm, systems that reward deception and detachment until they spiral into something toxic. There's a particularly rich moment of reflection when Malcolm, having narrowly escaped an ambush and lost a trusted contact, sits in silence before returning to the family. There's no music, no jokes, just Malcolm in half-costume, makeup smeared, trying to reconcile the dualities in his life. This moment is critical from a storytelling perspective. It's not about plot. It's about choice. Does he keep pretending, even though the charade is getting harder to maintain? Or does he risk everything to finally be honest, with the family, with the Bureau, and most importantly, with himself? That decision leads to one of the film's most satisfying climaxes. In rushing back to the talent show, Big Mama re-enters not just as a protector, but as someone deeply invested in these people. Her appearance isn't just comedic fanfare, it's a symbol of emotional return. She's there not because it's part of the mission, but because it matters. She made a promise to a child. And in that moment, the absurdity of the costume fades, replaced by something pure, presence. The camera lingers on the kids smiling from the stage, Leah watching with tears in her eyes, and Malcolm, beneath the suit, finally understanding that being there, really there, is the mission he's been running from all along. From a critical perspective, the film's resolution lands more softly than most action comedies. There's no explosive shootout, no final villain monologue. Just quiet closure. Gail is caught. Tom is exonerated. The Fullers begin to heal. And Malcolm, for the first time, seems ready to hang up the suit not because he has to, but because he wants to. That choice carries significant thematic weight. It suggests growth not through victory, but through surrender, letting go of the mask and trusting that who you are is enough. Critics at the time of the film's release were mixed in their response, often citing the exaggerated humor and recycled premise as weaknesses. But those who looked deeper saw something else. They saw an actor, Martin Lawrence, balancing chaos and care in a way that few could. They saw a film that, while undeniably ridiculous in execution, made an honest attempt to talk about family, identity, and the roles we choose to play. Over the years, that perspective has only strengthened. Viewers who came for the laughs began to appreciate the layers. The jokes held up, sure, but so did the heart. One of the more emotionally resonant themes in the film is the concept of listening. Not just hearing, but really listening. Big Mama becomes the one person who listens without judgment, who doesn't try to fix everything, who lets the kids, Leah, and even Tom say the things they've buried. That kind of listening is rare in comedy, which often relies on talking over each other, rapid-fire dialogue, and miscommunication for laughs. Here, the film pauses. It breathes. And in those breaths, it finds connection. The film also deserves credit for its subtle commentary on masculinity. Malcolm is a man in a dress, Yes, and much of the comedy revolves around that. But the deeper message is more subversive. In order to grow, he has to embrace traits that society often codes as feminine: nurturing, patience, emotional vulnerability. And it's through those traits, not his FBI training or physical strength, that he saves the day. That shift is meaningful, especially in a genre that often equates masculinity with dominance. Here, softness is strength. Care is power. And the man who once saw disguise as deception begins to see it as discovery. There's something deeply human in the way the film wraps up. The final scene, where the Fullers visit Malcolm at home and thank him, not for saving them, but for seeing them, feels earned. It's not a grand ending. It's a personal one. A reminder that sometimes the most profound impact we have isn't in stopping crimes or catching bad guys. It's in being present, in choosing to listen, in deciding to love, even when it's complicated. So yes, Big Momma's House 2 is a comedy. A wild, exaggerated, deeply goofy comedy. But it's also something more. It's a story about identity, about how easy it is to lose ourselves in the roles we think we have to play. It's about the masks we wear, not for surveillance, but for survival. And most importantly, it's about the courage it takes to take those masks off, even if just for a moment, and say, "This is who I really am." Through that lens, the film's strange blend of humor and heart makes perfect sense. The laughter disarms us. The emotion sneaks in. And before we know it, we're not just entertained, we're moved. Because hidden beneath the prosthetics and pratfalls is a quiet truth, that sometimes the funniest stories are also the most honest. And sometimes the most ridiculous disguises help us see things more clearly than we ever could before. Behind every scene of Big Momma's House 2, behind every laugh, pratfall, and perfectly timed gag, there was a crew of dedicated creatives pulling the strings. A film like this, layered in costume, chaos, and physical comedy, doesn't come together by accident. It takes precision masked in silliness, choreography hidden inside calamity, and perhaps most importantly, a shared sense of humor that keeps everyone going through long days, tight deadlines, and unexpected challenges. The making of Big Momma's House 2 was, by all accounts, a production like no other. Equal parts outrageous and intimate, it was a set filled with noise, laughter, and more than a few moments of behind-the-scenes magic that audiences never got to see. From the very beginning, the filmmakers knew they were working with a challenging formula. The first Big Momma's House had been a hit, which meant expectations for the sequel were high. Not only did they need to recapture the charm of the original, but they also needed to expand it, make it bigger, funnier, and emotionally deeper. Director John Whitesell, who had a knack for blending heart and humor, was brought in to steer the ship. From day one, his directive was clear: we're not just making a comedy. We're making a circus with soul. That circus began each morning with one of the most elaborate and time-consuming elements of the entire production: the Big Momma transformation. Martin Lawrence's daily dive into character required nearly 5 hours of preparation. Makeup artists, costumers, and prosthetic specialists worked in sync to assemble what the crew called the suit, a multi-layered costume consisting of foam, latex, and mechanical elements that allowed Lawrence to emote beneath the disguise. It was sweaty, heavy, and exhausting, but Lawrence never once broke character after stepping into it. He would arrive on set as Martin and leave as Big Momma, with the crew adapting to the personality shift without skipping a beat. According to key makeup artist Barney Berman, the suit wasn't just a costume, it was a technical marvel. There were layers to it, he explained in interviews. We had to design it to be expressive, safe, and funny. And most importantly, it had to survive Martin's physical comedy without falling apart. Early prototypes struggled to keep up with Lawrence's energy, especially during scenes with running, jumping, or dance sequences. The team eventually created a reinforced version of the suit, sewn with hidden mesh supports and air vents that could be cooled between takes with battery-powered fans tucked beneath Big Momma's dress. While the costume department focused on keeping Big Momma intact, The rest of the crew worked on shaping the suburban world around her. The Fuller home, where most of the story unfolds, was a carefully curated blend of cozy and chaotic. While exterior shots were filmed at a real house in a Los Angeles suburb, interior scenes were built on a soundstage to allow for camera flexibility and stunts. The production design team studied real family homes to get the right lived-in feel, complete with mismatched couch pillows, kid-made crafts on the fridge, and cluttered countertops. It had to look like a house in motion, production designer Nina Ruscio noted. A place where you could feel the tension and love, even in the mess. Staging scenes inside the home came with its own set of challenges. Since much of the humor relied on physical comedy, the spaces had to be functional as well as realistic. Sets were built with removable walls so the camera could follow Big Momma from room to room without cuts, especially during the fast-paced action scenes. One memorable shot, where Big Momma spins between the kitchen, hallway, and living room in a panic trying to stop the ferret, took almost a full day to choreograph. Multiple cameras were mounted to the ceiling to allow for wide, uninterrupted takes, something the director insisted on to maintain energy and rhythm. And then, of course, there were the children. Working with kids on any set requires patience, and Big Momma's House 2 had 3 young actors at the heart of its story. Chloe Grace Moretz, Kat Dennings, and Mark John Jeffries played the Fuller children, and each brought their own distinct personality to the shoot. Moretz, already showing signs of the commanding presence that would define her later career, frequently improvised her lines. The director encouraged it. "She had this natural timing," Whitesell said, "so we let her run wild." Some of the best laughs in the film came from Chloe just being herself. Dennings, in contrast, added a dry wit to her rebellious character that wasn't initially in the script. Writers rewrote her dialogue after the first week to better suit her delivery, adding more sarcasm and sharp comebacks. Jeffries, as the youngest of the group, spent much of his downtime between takes tinkering with the very computers his character loved on screen. A junior tech prodigy in real life, he once corrected a line in the script involving coding terminology, and the writers took his advice. Despite the age differences, the child actors bonded with Lawrence quickly. When not filming, they would gather around his chair and tell stories, joke around, or challenge him to trivia games. Lawrence, for his part, never dropped his Big Momma voice during breaks if the kids were around. "They believed in her," he said. "So I stayed in it. I wanted them to believe the magic." That commitment led to some surreal moments. One day, during a location shoot in a public park, several neighborhood kids ran up to hug Big Momma, thinking she was real. Lawrence bent down, signed autographs in character, and handed out lollipops from a floral handbag. A few adults in the area were so convinced by the disguise that they didn't recognize him until they heard his actual voice hours later. "It was like Santa Claus, but louder," one crew member said. The production wasn't without its hiccups. During one of the film's key stunts, a backyard chase involving a malfunctioning lawnmower and a frightened dog, the crew had to pause filming when the mechanical rig pulling the mower broke down mid-shot. It took hours to repair, during which the cast passed the time by playing a makeshift game of football in the yard. Several background extras joined in, and the impromptu game got so rowdy that the director joked about filming it for the DVD extras. Another moment of chaos came during the filming of the yoga class scene. The script called for a slow, exaggerated stretching routine led by Big Momma, but no one expected the extras, many of whom were real yoga enthusiasts, to take the scene so seriously. When Lawrence began improvising ridiculous poses, one of the instructors in the background followed along so intensely that she accidentally kicked over a studio light, narrowly missing the camera crew. No one was injured, but the resulting footage was so funny that it was repurposed for the final cut. Amid all the hijinks, there was also a real sense of camaraderie behind the camera. The crew would gather every Friday for Big Momma Bingo, where cast and crew predicted what new piece of chaos the week's shoot would bring. Squares included things like wig malfunction, child actor improvises again, and Martin ad-libs entire scene. The winner got to choose the playlist for that day's rap party, which often turned into spontaneous dance-offs in the catering tent. Amid all the hijinks, there was also a real sense of camaraderie behind the camera. The crew would gather every Friday for Big Momma Bingo, where cast and crew predicted what new piece of chaos the week's shoot would bring. Squares included things like wig malfunction, child actor improvises again, and Martin ad-libs entire scene. The winner got to choose the playlist for that day's rap party, which often turned into spontaneous dance-offs in the catering tent. The post-production process also had its share of surprises. Because so much of the dialogue was improvised, editors had to sort through hundreds of hours of footage to build scenes that felt natural. One sequence, the kitchen breakfast scene, where Big Momma tries to serve everyone while keeping an eye on Tom, was pieced together from 5 different takes, each with different lines. The final version was a mix of scripted dialogue, spontaneous ad-libs, and reactions that were 100% real. Sometimes the best moments weren't planned, editor Priscilla Ned Friendly recalled. They just happened, and we caught them. Music also played a significant role in shaping the film's tone. Composer George S. Clinton returned to score the sequel, blending energetic orchestration with quirky musical flourishes that matched Big Momma's unpredictable energy. The music team collaborated closely with the editors to time beats with physical gags, sometimes adjusting tempo or key mid-sequence to match a dance or pratfall. There were also last-minute musical additions, like the now iconic dance number during the talent show, which was added just weeks before the final cut. The choreography was created over a weekend, with Lawrence and the child actors rehearsing during lunch breaks to get it just right. And perhaps the most touching insight of all, when filming wrapped, the production crew gave Martin Lawrence a custom-made Big Momma doll, complete with miniature accessories, a tiny badge tucked in her purse, and a recorded voice clip of her most iconic one-liners. Lawrence reportedly laughed for 10 minutes straight and then hugged every member of the crew. Big Momma's house may second look like chaos on the outside, but behind the camera, it was a machine powered by passion, collaboration, and a genuine desire to make something joyful. Everyone, from the stunt coordinators to the costume designers, the child actors to the camera assistants, contributed not just to a movie, but to a feeling. A feeling that comedy could still be silly without being empty. That a story could be absurd and still matter. That laughter, especially the kind that erupts when someone falls in a wig and house slippers, has a kind of magic no CGI can replicate. And that's the heart of this production. Not the explosions or plot twists, but the people behind the madness. The ones who laughed when the ferret escaped, who clapped when the pie finally landed, who stayed late to stitch one more hem into Big Momma's dress. It's their work, their energy, and their joy that made the film what it is. And long after the credits rolled, their stories, like the movie itself, still make people smile. At first glance, Big Momma's House 2 might seem like the kind of film that depends entirely on its characters and gags to carry the weight of the story. But tucked inside all the over-the-top costumes and comedic chaos is a thoughtfully designed world that plays an enormous role in making everything feel believable, immersive, and emotionally resonant. The setting isn't just a backdrop, it's an active player in the narrative, shaping the story's tone, influencing its mood, and giving the characters a stage that amplifies both the humor and the heart. From the cozy chaos of the Fuller home to the wide-open suburban streets and high-tech government offices, every location in the film contributes to the distinct atmosphere that makes Big Momma's House 2 more than just another sequel. It makes it a world we can step into. The Fuller family home is the centerpiece of the film's setting. It's the arena where Big Momma does most of her investigating, cooking, disciplining, eavesdropping, and occasionally falling down the stairs. But more than that, it's a space that evolves as the characters do. At first, the house feels stiff and segmented. It's meticulously decorated, almost sterile in its perfection. There's a visible distance between rooms and, symbolically, between the people who live in them. The production design team deliberately chose a floor plan that placed the parents' room on the opposite side of the house from the children's bedrooms, adding to the sense of emotional distance within the family. Leah's living room is pristine, untouched, like a magazine spread. The kids' rooms, by contrast, are chaotic, layered with personality, cluttered in a way that reveals who they are before they ever say a word. As Big Momma begins to integrate herself into the household, subtle shifts in the environment reflect her growing influence. The kitchen becomes messier, filled with laughter, flour on the counters, and snacks half-finished. The living room loses its showroom shine, replaced with coloring books, scattered toys, and jackets left on the couch. Cinematically, the lighting changes, too. What begins as a space bathed in cold, white brightness begins to soften, with golden hues spilling into rooms during mealtime scenes and warmer shadows settling in during quiet conversations. It's not just a visual technique, it's a way to show that the family, under Big Momma's chaotic care, is warming up, breaking down the barriers between them. Outside of the home, the film takes place in the kind of suburban sprawl that feels immediately familiar to anyone who's ever lived in or driven through a neatly trimmed neighborhood. Wide streets, symmetrical houses, local parks, and family-friendly community centers make up the world around the Fullers. These places are deliberately safe, almost exaggerated in their normalcy. That's part of the joke, the idea that a high-stakes FBI operation could be hiding beneath such an aggressively average surface. But it also plays into the film's deeper commentary, that dysfunction, secrecy, and emotional distance can exist even in the most picturesque environments. One of the most memorable locations in the film is the community center where the children's activities, and Big Momma's most spectacular comedic moments, unfold. The yoga studio, for example, is visually distinct from the rest of the film's settings. Bright pastel walls, mirrored panels, and exaggerated lighting give the space an almost surreal feel, which enhances the ridiculousness of seeing Big Momma attempt a downward dog while surrounded by ultra-serious fitness moms. It's moments like this where the setting itself becomes part of the comedy, a space that intentionally contrasts with the character occupying it. Then there's the local school, which serves as a crucial backdrop for several key moments. The stage for the talent show, the hallways where Big Momma counsels troubled students, and the gymnasium where she tries, and fails, to blend in. These locations are all staged to feel like familiar spaces, places where we expect things to be predictable. But the film flips that expectation, using these locations to create tension, laughter, and eventually, catharsis. The climax of the movie, set during the school talent show, wouldn't work nearly as well if it didn't take place in such an emotionally charged space. The stage isn't just a place for performances. The cinematography of Big Momma's house, too, doesn't draw attention to itself in a flashy way, but that's part of its strength. Director of photography Mark Irwin, known for his work on both action and comedy films, uses the camera as a quiet observer, allowing the performances to take center stage while subtly shaping our emotional response through movement and framing. Early scenes, for example, often employ wider shots and longer takes, keeping the camera at a distance. This reinforces Malcolm's outsider status, his discomfort in the Fuller world, and the emotional gaps between the family members. As the film progresses, the shots become tighter, more intimate. Close-ups capture moments of vulnerability, handheld movements bring a sense of urgency, and reaction shots punctuate the humor in unexpected ways. There's also a clever use of contrast throughout the film. Whenever we shift between Malcolm's FBI world and the family setting, the visual language changes. The government offices and surveillance scenes are shot with cooler tones, sharper shadows, and a more controlled camera style. Steady, precise, calculated. These visual choices underline the sterile, impersonal nature of that world, which stands in stark opposition to the colorful, emotionally messy reality of the Fuller home. This contrast reinforces the idea that Malcolm doesn't belong in one world or the other. He's stuck between them, trying to figure out where he fits. Lighting plays a huge role in setting the film's tone. In daytime scenes, the Fuller home is bathed in soft, natural light that enhances the feeling of normalcy. But at night, shadows deepen. Corners become more mysterious. This shift is particularly noticeable during scenes where Malcolm investigates the house while the family sleeps. The camera follows him through dimly lit hallways, past partially open doors, into rooms filled with the quiet hum of electronics. These sequences could easily belong to a spy thriller, except for the fact that the spy is wearing orthopedic shoes and a wig. The juxtaposition of setting, tone, and character makes these scenes work both as suspense and satire. One of the film's most visually memorable scenes is the backyard chaos involving the dog, the lawnmower, and a series of unfortunate events that unfold in escalating hilarity. This sequence is masterfully blocked and shot like a miniature action set piece. Camera movements track the dog's path, cut rapidly between reactions, and heighten the tension with tight close-ups and exaggerated wide angles. It's a lesson in visual comedy: how to use setting, movement, and timing to tell a story without a single line of dialogue. Even the more minor locations are packed with visual storytelling. The mall scene, where Big Momma tries to keep track of the kids while also doing recon, is filled with deliberate distractions. Bright displays, bustling shoppers, layers of background action that mirror the chaos in Big Momma's mind. The camera swings between characters, capturing their confusion, frustration, and eventual bonding as they navigate the madness together. It's a deceptively simple scene, but it reveals a lot about the growing connection between Malcolm and the children, without ever spelling it out. Color, too, plays a key role in the film's cinematic language. Big Momma's wardrobe is a riot of floral prints, bold hues, and clashing patterns, each outfit designed to stand out against the neutral tones of her surroundings. She is, visually and thematically, an interruption, a disruption, a force of nature that crashes into an emotionally repressed household and brings everything out into the open. The more time she spends in the house, the more color begins to appear in the family's world. Leah starts wearing brighter clothes. The kids decorate their rooms with more confidence. Even the house itself seems to come alive, shifting from a place of tension to a space of expression. The use of sound in tandem with setting also deserves praise. The score, composed by George S. Clinton, dances playfully through scenes, matching the mood beat for beat. But it's the ambient sounds, the creak of floorboards, the buzz of suburban sprinklers, the muffled laughter from upstairs, that create a feeling of familiarity. These are the sounds of real life. They anchor the film, keeping it grounded even as the story veers into the absurd. By the time the film reaches its emotional peak, the setting has done its job quietly, steadily, with grace. The Fuller home isn't just a location anymore. It's a character in its own right. It's witnessed secrets, hosted arguments, contained laughter, and ultimately, helped bring its occupants back together. And in the final scenes, when Big Momma is gone and Malcolm is present, the home looks different. Not because anything's changed physically, but because now, it feels like it belongs to people who are truly connected. Big Momma's House may not be the kind of film you associate with cinematic depth, but that's exactly what makes its setting and visual elements so impressive. They do the work without demanding the spotlight. They guide the story, support the characters, and shape the audience's experience without ever feeling forced. They remind us that even the most outrageous comedies need structure, texture, and thoughtful design to truly resonate. And so, while Big Momma may take center stage in her bright dresses and booming voice, it's the world around her. The carefully lit rooms, the winding suburban streets, the softly shifting color palettes, that allow her story to shine. In that way, the film's setting does more than support the narrative. It becomes a part of it. A backdrop full of life, humor, and heart. Behind the polished humor and seamless performances of Big Momma's House too lies an entirely different story. One that never made it to the screen, but lived in the energy of the set, the laughter off camera, and the bond that developed between cast and crew as they brought this chaotic, heartfelt comedy to life. Making a film that combines slapstick antics, action, undercover drama, and family emotion is no small feat, but the behind-the-scenes world of Big Momma's House 2 was filled with just as much unpredictability, heart, and surprise as the movie itself. From day one of pre-production, the energy on set was described by many as loud but loving. With Martin Lawrence reprising his iconic role as both FBI agent Malcolm Turner and his alter ego Big Momma, the atmosphere was constantly shifting between intense focus and unfiltered hilarity. Lawrence was at the center of it all, not just as the lead actor, but as the emotional nucleus around which everyone else rotated. Once he was in full Big Momma regalia, his transformation wasn't just physical. His entire presence shifted. He spoke in character, walked in character, and often joked in character even during downtime. It became a set-wide running joke, "Big Momma is in charge now." The moment Lawrence walked out of makeup and wardrobe, donning the floral dress, orthopedic shoes, and layered padding, the cast and crew would instinctively treat him as Big Momma. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Crew members began speaking to him in southern drawls. The child actors would ask Big Momma for advice, not realizing, or perhaps not caring, that it was Lawrence beneath the wig. And Lawrence played along, fully inhabiting the role in ways that even surprised the director, John Whitesell. The child actors would ask Big Momma for advice, not realizing, or perhaps not caring, that it was Lawrence beneath the wig. And Lawrence played along, fully inhabiting the role in ways that even surprised the director, John Whitesell. "Martin wouldn't break," Whitesell said in an interview. He once gave an entire pep talk to the crew, in character, about staying hydrated and eating their greens. Nobody questioned it. But all of this commitment came at a cost. The Big Momma suit, crafted with foam padding, prosthetics, and heavy costuming, was sweltering under studio lights. Martin Lawrence would spend hours inside the costume, drenched in sweat, often requiring special fans to be tucked into the suit just to keep his body temperature down. Between takes, crew members would gather around him with handheld fans, water bottles, and cold towels. "We treated him like a football player in the fourth quarter," joked one of the assistant directors. And it wasn't just Lawrence facing challenges. The Fuller family household, where most of the action takes place, was built on a soundstage that mimicked a real suburban home, but with a twist. The walls could be removed, furniture shifted, and ceilings adjusted for lighting rigs. As authentic as it looked on screen, the house was more like a puzzle, reassembled daily depending on what scenes were scheduled. Continuity became a major concern. There were multiple instances where a scene was halfway through filming before someone realized a pillow was missing from a couch, or a photo frame had been flipped. The crew began calling these slip-ups "Momma moments," and even printed stickers with a cartoon of Big Momma pointing at a crooked painting to place on the continuity board. Among the standout relationships on set was the dynamic between Lawrence and the child actors. Chloe Grace Moretz, who played the driven and tightly wound Molly Fuller, was just 8 years old at the time, but her professionalism and energy were undeniable. She was constantly asking questions, improvising dialogue, and pulling pranks. She once snuck into the costume department and wore one of Big Momma's wigs during a scene rehearsal just to see if anyone would notice. They did, but not until she delivered an entire line with a flawless Southern accent, earning a round of applause. Kat Dennings, playing Carrie, brought a dry, sarcastic tone to the set that balanced out the energy. Though younger than most of the adult cast, she often riffed with Lawrence between takes, trading jokes and quips that felt more like seasoned comedy veterans than co-stars. Her on-set nickname became the Quiet Storm, because she'd sit silently during prep and then deliver a joke so sharp it would have the crew in stitches. Mark John Jeffries, portraying Andrew, had a different rhythm. He was deeply focused on his lines, often rehearsing quietly to himself in corners. But when Big Momma entered a scene, his eyes would light up with joy. He later admitted he believed, for a brief period, that Big Momma was a real person with superpowers. Lawrence, hearing this, went along with it, signing the young actor's scripts Big Momma, and even pretending to receive FBI calls in character during lunch breaks. The supporting cast bonded in quieter but meaningful ways. Emily Proctor, who played Leah Fuller, was a calming presence during some of the film's more chaotic days. Often the one reminding everyone to breathe, she organized a gratitude board in the cast lounge where people could write notes to each other anonymously. Notes like, "Thank you for letting me borrow your wig glue," and "Great job not falling off the stepladder during take 3, became tiny tokens of connection that made long filming days a little more human. One of the most talked about incidents behind the scenes was the ferret situation. During a scene involving the family's pet ferret, who was meant to crawl across the floor and into Big Momma's handbag, the animal suddenly darted in the wrong direction and vanished behind a cabinet on set. For nearly an hour, production halted as crew members, led by the animal wrangler, searched for the elusive creature. It was eventually coaxed out with a banana and piece of chicken. Lawrence stayed in character the entire time, pretending Big Momma was negotiating with a very rude little weasel. Then there was the infamous kitchen fire. During a breakfast scene, where Big Momma is supposed to flamboyantly flip pancakes and multitask between 3 burners, one of the prop stoves overheated and triggered the fire alarm. The sprinklers didn't go off, thankfully, but the kitchen set was evacuated, and filming paused for the day. When they returned the next morning, the crew found the entire kitchen redressed with real, non-functional food props instead of heated appliances. The note taped to the fridge read, "Big Momma doesn't need fire to bring the heat." Stunt work also brought its fair share of tension and triumph. In one chase scene involving Big Momma leaping over a backyard fence while being chased by a dog, a stunt double in full costume had to repeat the action 8 times due to continuity issues. The heat inside the suit, combined with the tight angles needed for the shot, made it one of the most demanding sequences in the film. At the end of the day, the cast and crew cheered and presented the double with a Best Supporting Skirt award, a custom-made belt featuring a Barbie doll in a wig glued to a toy fence. Through all the madness, one thing remained constant: the spirit of joy. There were dance parties between takes, sing-alongs in the makeup trailer, and weekly themed lunches organized by the catering team. One week was Southern Comfort Day, where everyone dressed in florals and served peach cobbler. Another was Undercover Wednesday, where cast members tried to sneak past security in costume disguises of their own. Lawrence dressed as a janitor and fooled 3 crew members. Director John Whitesell was known for keeping the vibe light but focused. He encouraged improvisation, often letting scenes run longer than scripted to capture spontaneous moments. This approach led to several unscripted gems that made the final cut, including Big Momma's dance scene at the school, her impromptu monologue about family dinners, and a moment where she accidentally knocks over a vase and blames it on ghosts with bad manners. Post-production brought its own challenges. With so many improvised takes and comedic tangents, the editors faced a mountain of footage to sort through. They joked that the film could have had a director's cut 3 times longer than the theatrical release, filled entirely with alternate jokes and deleted scenes. In fact, an internal blooper reel, shown only at the wrap party, ran nearly 45 minutes long and was dubbed The Gospel According to Momma. When filming wrapped, the goodbyes weren't easy. Lawrence gave an emotional speech, out of costume, thanking each department for helping him bring Big Momma to life once again. The crew gifted him a photo album filled with Polaroids, behind-the-scenes notes, and one very memorable drawing of Big Momma flying a helicopter, a joke about a never-filmed scene that existed only in table-read fantasy. In the end, Big Momma's House 2 wasn't just a film, it was a shared experience. A production where every spilled prop, delayed shoot, and ferret escape became part of a bigger story about people coming together to create something joyous. When filming wrapped, the goodbyes weren't easy. Lawrence gave an emotional speech, out of costume, thanking each department for helping him bring Big Momma to life once again. The crew gifted him a photo album filled with Polaroids, behind-the-scenes notes, and one very memorable drawing of Big Momma flying a helicopter, a joke about a never-filmed scene that existed only in table-read fantasy. In the end, Big Momma's House 2 wasn't just a film, it was a shared experience. A production where every spilled prop, delayed shoot, and ferret escape became part of a bigger story about people coming together to create something joyous. The love behind the camera is what gave the movie its heart on screen. It's what made the laughter feel real, the emotion feel earned, and the absurdity feel like something you could strangely believe in. Because somewhere, between the wigs and the wardrobe racks, between pancake fires and hallway dance-offs, something true happened. People connected. People laughed. And they made a film that, for all its silliness, was made with real heart. That's the kind of story you don't see in the credits, but it's the one that stays with you long after the curtain falls. At the surface, Big Momma's House 2 is loud, bright, and wrapped in floral dresses and physical comedy. It's the kind of film that leads with laughter, one built around a disguise so outrageous, so cartoonishly unlikely, that it feels impossible to take seriously. And yet, tucked inside the belly laughs and pratfalls, beneath the pancake mishaps and wig-snatched chaos, lies something quieter. Something that resonates in between the jokes. That something is the film's unexpected heart, a collection of themes and symbols that transform it from a simple sequel into a story with meaning, warmth, and even a whisper of wisdom. The most immediate theme that pulses throughout the film is identity. Not just the surface-level, who are you wearing kind of identity, but the deeper, more complicated version that asks, who are you when no one's watching? And who are you when everyone is? Malcolm Turner, the man behind Big Momma, is the epicenter of this theme. As a former field agent turned family man, Malcolm begins the story struggling with who he's become. He's no longer chasing suspects across rooftops or decoding crime syndicates. He's attending PDA meetings, playing stepdad, and quietly fading into suburban routine. There's a sadness to his restlessness. A man who once thrived in high-stakes situations now finds himself lost in the day-to-day. And so, when the opportunity arises to become Big Momma once again, he doesn't just take it for the mission, he takes it to feel alive. Big Momma, then, becomes more than a costume. She becomes a symbol of freedom, of agency, of reawakening. But the beauty lies in the irony. In order to find his true self, Malcolm has to become someone else. The film plays with this duality constantly. As Big Momma, Malcolm has permission to care, to nurture, to listen. He becomes the figure that everyone opens up to, not because she's flawless, but because she's present. Big Momma listens when others don't. She notices the sadness in Molly's dance routines, the fear behind Andrew's silence, and the pressure tightening Leah's smile. Through her, Malcolm becomes the best version of himself. And the film quietly asks us to consider, do we need masks to be real? Or do masks just give us permission to drop the ones we wear every day? This theme of duality isn't limited to Malcolm. Every character in the Fuller household is, in some way, hiding. Tom, the father, is buried in work, not just for his job, but as a way of avoiding the emotional unraveling of his family. He's so consumed by his responsibilities that he doesn't see how distant he's become. His computer screen becomes a symbol, a glowing, silent wall between him and the people who need him. The more he stares into it, the more invisible he becomes. And yet, he believes he's doing everything right. Providing, protecting, fixing. But the truth is, he's disconnected. Symbolically, his office, tucked away, dimly lit, isolated, is the physical manifestation of that emotional barrier. Leah, his wife, wears a different kind of mask. She is the picture of suburban perfection, volunteer coordinator, carpool queen, loving mother. But beneath the high-functioning exterior is a woman quietly losing her grip. Her organized chaos becomes its own kind of camouflage. She stays busy so she doesn't have to feel. So she doesn't have to confront what's been slipping away. The warmth in her marriage, the sense of closeness with her children, and the space for her own needs. Her perfectly set dinner table becomes a symbol of control. No matter what's falling apart emotionally, if the plates are straight and the napkins match, maybe no one will notice. Then there are the children, each carrying their own quiet burdens, each symbolic in their own right. Molly, the overachiever, represents the theme of perfection as a shield. Her meticulous dancing, her carefully composed routines, her relentless need to succeed, it's all a way to hold something together inside her. When Big Momma enters her world, the symbolism becomes clear. Big Momma's wildness, her messiness, her unfiltered love, it's the antithesis of Molly's carefully constructed armor. Through her, Molly learns that being seen doesn't mean being flawless. That you don't have to earn love through achievement. Carrie, the middle child, is rebellion wrapped in eyeliner and sarcasm. Her theme is rejection, the rejection of expectation, the rejection of connection, even the rejection of her own vulnerability. She hides behind a wall of snark, but it's really just fear. Fear of disappointment. Fear of being forgotten. Her messy room, cluttered with posters and half-written journals, becomes a symbol of that internal storm. And Big Momma, hilariously out of place in Carrie's teenage world, becomes a symbol of unrelenting presence. She doesn't try to fix Carrie. She just stays. And sometimes, that's more powerful than any lecture. Andrew, the youngest, embodies the theme of fear. Not of monsters or darkness, but of the outside world. He clings to technology, buries himself in data, because it feels safe. Predictable. Logic protects him from emotion. His computer code becomes his armor. And when Big Momma steps into his life, loud, unpredictable, full of contradictions, he has to learn that life isn't always logical. That chaos can be comforting. That people, not machines, bring warmth. Another rich theme in the film is the idea of presence. In today's world, presence is often mistaken for proximity. You can sit across from someone and still be miles away. The Fuller family lives together, but they're emotionally scattered. Conversations are clipped. Eye contact is rare. Laughter is missing. Big Momma doesn't just enter the house, she fills it. Her presence is so loud, so impossible to ignore, that the walls themselves seem to shift. Slowly, dinner conversations return. Schedules align. Laughter sneaks in. The symbolism is subtle but potent. It takes someone fully pretending to wake everyone else up. One of the more surprising symbols in the film is the kitchen. At the beginning of the movie, it's pristine. Polished counters. Stainless steel appliances. A place built for appearance, not function. But as Big Momma settles in, the kitchen becomes alive. Flour dusts the countertops. Dishes pile up. Meals are burned. And yet, there's warmth. Connection. The kitchen, once sterile, becomes a symbol of imperfection embraced. A place where mess means memory. The school talent show, where the film reaches one of its emotional peaks, is also layered with symbolism. It's a stage, literally and figuratively, where characters reveal their truths. Molly dances not just for applause, but for acknowledgement. Carrie sings not just for the crowd, but for her own voice. And Malcolm, watching it all, realizes he's not just playing Big Momma anymore. He's become a part of something real. The stage becomes a mirror. Everyone, in their own way, steps into the light. Another important symbolic thread is the idea of communication, and how often we fail at it. Tom uses silence as defense. Leah uses busyness. The kids use avoidance. Malcolm uses disguise. Everyone's speaking, but no one's being heard. And so Big Momma, oversized and outrageous, becomes the ultimate symbol of communication unfiltered. She says what no one else will. She listens in a way no one else does. And in doing so, she opens the door for others to speak, really speak, for the first time in a long while. The climax of the film, when the true threat is revealed and the action kicks into high gear, still manages to maintain its thematic depth. Even in the rush of espionage and exposure, the focus remains on connection. Malcolm doesn't just save the day, he shows up. Not as Big Momma, not as a hero, but as himself. And that moment, quiet and powerful, becomes the true resolution. The symbol of the suit is finally stripped away. The man remains. The film closes with subtlety. The family begins to heal, not in grand gestures, but in the little things. Tom talks more. Leah smiles more freely. The kids tease each other again. And Malcolm, finally at peace, takes off the wig and sits down at the table. As himself. As present. As enough. That's the quiet genius of Big Momma's house too. It wraps itself in comedy, but underneath the laughs is a meditation on being seen. On being honest. On the fear of failing and the courage to stay anyway. Because at its heart, the film says what so many of us need to hear, that it's okay to be messy. That showing up is more important than being perfect. That sometimes, pretending to be someone else leads us back to who we were always meant to be. And maybe, just maybe, a little chaos in the kitchen isn't such a bad thing after all. Behind the booming laughs and unforgettable costume transformations of Big Momma's House 2, a quieter, more intricate engine is always at work. It's not just the dialogue or the wild disguises that make the movie tick, it's the filmmaking itself. Beneath all the exaggerated facial expressions and whirlwind antics lies a structure that was carefully planned, executed with precision, and edited to pull off a very specific type of comedy. The kind that lives right on the edge of absurdity and heart. The kind where a man in a wig can make you laugh, then make you feel. And that balance didn't come from the script alone. It came from the camera angles, the lighting setups, the sound cues, the rhythm of the edits. From the way one joke lands because of a perfectly timed pause, and the way a moment of silence holds just long enough to give you something real. Director John Whitesell approached the film with the awareness that visual tone mattered just as much as comedic timing. The goal wasn't to reinvent the wheel, but to use cinematic techniques to elevate the material beyond a simple guy in disguise premise. He wanted to make a film that felt fast, colorful, immersive, and more importantly, emotionally grounded underneath all the comedy. The first decision made in this direction was with the camera work. Shot primarily on 35mm film to maintain a rich, clean aesthetic, Big Momma's House 2 used a combination of handheld cameras for chaotic scenes and steady tracking shots for emotional or character-focused moments. This contrast added a subtle shift in tone depending on the moment. For instance, when Big Momma is caught in a kitchen disaster or chased by a rogue vacuum, the camera moves with a jittery, almost documentary-like energy. It mirrors her chaos, places us right in the moment. But when the scenes slow down, when Malcolm sits quietly in the child's room, reflecting on what he's becoming, the camera holds still. It breathes. That restraint brings gravity to the scene. You don't notice it at first, but you feel it. One of the standout visual techniques used throughout the film was the recurring use of mid-shots layered with background motion. These shots, common during the family's routine moments, breakfasts, car rides, casual conversations, allow the viewer to track not just the dialogue, but the dynamics unfolding silently in the background. A sibling's glare, a distracted parent, Big Momma slipping behind a doorway. It's a technique borrowed from ensemble comedies, and it plays beautifully here. It allows tension, humor, and intimacy to unfold in the same frame without cutting away, lending the film a surprisingly organic quality amid its broad premise. Lighting was another essential tool in shaping the mood of the film. From the sterile brightness of the FBI headquarters to the cozy warmth of the Fuller family kitchen, each space carried its own visual temperature. The production lighting team played with color warmth to enhance emotional cues, yellows and ambers for family scenes, cool blues and grays for scenes of surveillance or secrecy. That emotional coloring helped audiences navigate the shifts in tone without needing to be told. You just knew when the story was leaning toward connection, or when it was tilting toward tension. And then, of course, there's the editing, the unseen magician's hand that shapes every beat, every gag, every turn of emotion. Edited by Priscilla Ned Friendly, the film finds its rhythm in the edit room. Comedy lives and dies on timing, and in a movie where half the jokes come from physical mishaps and costume-based chaos, pacing is everything. 1 second too long, and a joke feels tired. 1 second too short, and it doesn't land. The editors leaned into rhythm as a kind of hidden pulse. Fast cuts during physical scenes, slower dissolves during emotional beats. They even experimented with reaction-based editing, often cutting not to the punchline, but to the facial response from another character. It's a small decision, but one that adds depth, showing us not just the joke, but how it ripples outward. There's also a fascinating technical element that went into the sound design. In a comedy like this, sound effects become characters. The squish of cake under Big Momma's shoe. The exaggerated zipper noise as she tugs her dress into place. The dramatic swoosh as she twirls during a dance routine. These sound choices weren't accidents. They were exaggerated intentionally to highlight the absurdity of the moment. The film didn't aim for realism in its sound design. It aimed for texture, layering comedic sound cues into even the quietest scenes to create atmosphere. The soundtrack itself leaned into this tonal balance.